Alright guys and gals, welcome back. Today I'm going to be giving you a rundown on Palmetto State's compact dagger. So first things first, check there's no round in the chamber, there's no magazine in it, the gun is clear, empty, and safe. Now I'm going to be talking to you about a couple different things. First, I'm going to go over the product details from the manufacturer themselves, so all the specifications of the compact dagger and what you get with it. And then I'm going to get into my personal opinion based on the time that I spent with it and the rounds that I've shot. And I've only shot roughly around 400 to 500 rounds through this pistol, so all my opinions and everything that I'm going to be giving you is going to be based off that round count that I've shot through it. And we'll discuss that a little bit more as I'm getting into those details. But for now, let's jump into the specifications. Alright guys, getting into the product details. The model is the Palmetto Dagger Compact. It's chambered at 9mm, its action is striker fired, it weighs 22.4 ounces unloaded. Its overall length is 7.15 inches. Its overall width is 1.28 inches. Overall height is 4.78 inches without a mag. The barrel length is 3.9 inches. The barrel material is stainless steel. The barrel finish is a DLC coating. The twist rate is the SAA MI spec 1 in 10. Slide material is stainless steel. Slide finish is DLC coating. Frame is polymer. The front side is steel with a white dot. The rear sight is also steel with 2 white dots. The safety is a striker block safety and trigger safety, and it comes with one 15-round magazine. Alright, now that we've got these specifications out of the way, we can get into some of my opinions on it based on the time that I've had it and have shot it. So here I have my Glock 45. You can see there's no magazine inserted. There's no round in the chamber. This one's also safe and clear. But I've got it here to help do some of the comparisons to the compact dagger. For those of you that may not know, the compact dagger is largely based off the Gen 3 Glock 19. There are some differences, but there's more similarities than there are differences. A lot of the parts cross over from the Gen 3 Glocks to the compact daggers, so you get a lot of interchangeability there. A lot of the ergonomics are very similar. The dimensions are very similar. And there's really not too many striking differences other than, I would say, the frame shape, which we'll talk about here a little bit more in just a minute. So we'll get into a few caveats, right? Like I said, I've only shot about 400 to 500 rounds through it, which for some people that may be quite a few. For maybe just your real average Joe gun owner who maybe has 1 or 2 guns, maybe goes out to the range once or twice a year, shoots a couple boxes of ammo. 400 to 500 rounds may seem like a significant amount. For people like myself and other serious shooters and practitioners, whether it be shooting competition, practitioners of self-defense, preparedness, hopefully, law enforcement, doing a lot of training, military, whoever it is, 400 to 500 rounds, you can go through that pretty quickly, depending on who you are, either in like 1 or 2 range sessions. I myself typically shoot about 200 rounds per range session. For this one, I went a little bit harder, hit that 400 to 500 round marker, so I could get a little bit more time behind it, get a little bit of a better feel and talk to you guys about it. And within that 400 to 500 rounds, the first thing that stood out to me and that I can say I was very happy about was the fact that I didn't have a single malfunction. And I shot a variety of ammunition, although they were all about the same bullet weight. They were all 115 grain, but it was a mix of brass case, steel cased, Federal, Tool, PMC, Blazer, and a couple others, I think. But so a mixed bag of 115 grain ammunition, 400 to 500 rounds, not a single malfunction. And that's awesome considering, the cost of these pistols compared to, what they're compared against, like Glocks or other big name pistols. Just to run 400 to 500 rounds without a single issue straight out of the box is pretty awesome. Well, I say straight out of the box, right? I gave it a quick wipe down, gave it a little bit of lubricant because it is a machine, right? And machines are designed to run with lubrication, with some sort of oil. I'm a firm believer in that. As long as you take care of your equipment should take care of you, assuming it's made well enough. Because I like to use this comparison, right? I wouldn't drain the oil out of my car and run it dry just to see if it could, right? Because you're gonna seize up the engine and destroy your car, right? Now, the results of not having any oil on your gun aren't going to be that dramatic. However, oil is designed to reduce friction between moving parts in a machine, and there's a lot of hot moving parts in these, when you're running them fast and hard. So if you want them to run properly and for a long time, make sure you maintain and oil your guns. Now, with that being said, we'll work away from the top down on what I thought of each aspect of this pistol. So we have the sights, off to a great start, because factory Glock sights, again, comparing it to Gen 3 Glock 19s, factory Glock sights come plastic, and then they have the U shape on the back for the rear sight, and then just a single white dot on the front. Single white dot on the front is fine. However, I personally am not a fan of the U shape in the back. I'm a fan of the sights that the Dagger comes with, and that's just the 2 white dots on the back. So you just line up the 3 dots and you're good to go. Also not a fan of the plastic sights, just because I don't want, something that I'm relying on to aim my gun to be plastic, right? So, because it has a tendency to break over compared to steel. So it's awesome that on a budget pistol, they decided to go with the steel option on the sights. Now, the downside to that is, I think, as part of one of their cost-saving measures, they didn't put tritium night sights on it, so you don't have a night sight option. But that's usually not a huge deal as long as you have a weapon light mounted. The weapon light usually will give you enough illumination, enough splash somewhere to where you're able to at least pick up the sights somewhat and use them relatively effectively. And I actually don't have it on here on this exact second, because I usually keep it on my Glock and I switched it back over when I was done shooting. But for the purposes of this review, I will actually switch it back over, because I will also need this to show you how it fits in holsters. But as you guys can see during the shooting montages, the whole time I shot, I had my Streamlight TLR1 HL mounted to it. So we'll get that back on there. All right. So that's mounted back on, good to go. So moving down the slide, again, nothing fancy about it. Like I said, DLC coating. It's got the nice slide serrations and some nice groove cuts in there. Maybe it's just as an aesthetic measure and a very, 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 very slight weight saving measure. But again, nice slide cuts. Everything is good and symmetrical, well done. I do like the light gray finish coloring on it. Gives it a little bit of a two-tone look overall. Again, that's just an aesthetic preference. Has nothing to do with the performance, but it is nice that they did it. So slide serrations, for those of you that might not know, I don't remember if on some of the older gen Glocks, I think they don't have the front slide serrations like the compact Dagger went with. I know on the Gen 5s, like this is a Gen 5 45, it's got the front slide serrations. But I think on some of the older Glocks, they didn't have these. So it's nice that they opted to go with them, even though they were trying to, again, cut costs and get a budget-friendly compact pistol similar to the Glock on the market. Okay, so those are good for gripping, doing chamber checks, clearing malfunctions if you have them, reloading, whatever, what have you. Especially if your hands are sweaty, things are dirty, things get slippery. Just having that extra grip in there just helps you keep the pistol functioning. So moving down to parts on the frame, slide lock, slide release. Okay, nothing fancy. It's not an oversized one. Doesn't have any crazy angles. It's there and it does what it's supposed to, right? Which is perfect. Which, when it comes to those, I don't like aftermarket stuff, because if you have the ones that stick up or out or that are oversized, and when you lock down your grip, sometimes people have a tendency to put pressure on the slide lock, slide release. And whenever you're on the last round of your magazine, you shoot it, it should lock back because the follower in the magazine is pushing up that slide lock, slide release. But if your thumb is pressed down on it, putting pressure on it while you're shooting, and that last round goes out, it won't lock back because you're putting pressure on the slide lock. And doesn't allow it to pop up. So just having a stock, smaller sized one that's not going to get in your way and that's going to allow it to function the way it's supposed to when you're out of rounds is awesome. The takedown levers, exactly the same as the Gen 3 Glock 19s, and actually even up to the Gen 5 ones, where you actuate the trigger, depress the slide back slightly, push down on the 2 bars there, slide comes forward and comes off, exactly like a Glock. So if you're already familiar with how to disassemble, reassemble Glocks and clean them and maintain them, you're not gonna have to learn anything new because it's just the same. Now moving down to the overall frame itself. This is where one of the big differences between the Glocks and the compact Daggers are, in my opinion. Because the frames on there, they're in my opinion, a little bit more akin to the M&Ps, the Smith & Wesson M&P series pistols. The texturing is very similar to them. It's different than the Glock's checkered texturing. Right? This has more of that very, very light sandpaper feel. It's a little bit more bulged, a little bit more rounder, thicker, if you will, or fatter than Glock's. Glock's are a little bit more symmetrical. This is a little bit more oblong. And some people don't like that, especially if they have smaller hands, because when you have those fatter grips, it can be harder to get a really tight grip and cinch down on the pistol. I've got bigger, meatier paws, so personally it's not a problem for me. I had no problem grabbing it and immediately driving out, finding my sights, maintaining my grip on it, and managing the recoil. And the grip angle itself on the frame is very similar to Glock's. Don't know if you'll be able to see that there. So it's very similar up into the tang or the beaver tail. And then once you get down to the bottom here, the bottom part on the compact dagger actually bulges out a little bit more than the Glock itself. So you can see, and moving down, you can see on the Gen 5 frames, they don't have the protrusion on the front here that was supposed to, sit between the middle of your fingers. They added that on there. For me, I don't care either way. It doesn't bother me one way or the other. People have opinions that they don't like that protrusion because not all hands are the same, not all hands fit the same. While that's true, having that little bit there, in my opinion, doesn't change the performance of your grip where you're shooting really at all, because it doesn't stick out far enough to truly affect anything. So if you're missing your shots, I wouldn't be blaming that little bump there screwing up your grip. You probably just need to practice a little more. Now the trigger guard. The trigger guard is one of the only few real complaints I have about this pistol. Because if you're going to clone something or model it off something, take all the best parts of it, enhance them, and then leave the worst parts of them behind. And personally, I hate Glock trigger guards because they rub the crap out of my middle knuckle, right? There's actually a thing called Glock knuckle. It's a thing. If you shoot Glocks a lot, then you have callus and scarring there on your middle finger knuckle, just because of the way the trigger guard sits on it. And when you're gripping down tight and you're shooting a lot of rounds, it just rubs it raw. But you can take it to people that can do stippling and that can cut down on the frame a little bit. And a lot of times they can smooth it out, change the shape and the size just a little bit to help reduce a lot of that wear on your hand. But Palmetto State decided to go with the typical Glock trigger guard design, which in my opinion was a mistake, but it's not a deal breaker. The magazine release, also not a big fan of. While it works just fine, I don't like how much it protrudes out and is a smaller surface area. I would much rather have like a Gen 4 or a Gen 5 Glock that has the flatter, wider magazine release. So when it's actually, when it's in my hand, I feel like I've got a lot more real estate on it, a lot more positive pressing on it. So whenever I want to get that mag out, I can really get that mag out. And then with that protrusion, and this is kind of a not like a super unique case, but it can become an issue if you carry inside the waistband on the hip, which not a ton of people do because appendix carry is very popular these days and has been for a little while. But if you do carry on the hip inside the waistband, there's a good chance that with a protruding mag release like that, at some point you're going to put enough pressure on that moving around, or maybe if you're like sitting down in your car seat and it's pressed up against the sides where it kind of buckets up a little bit, or the seatbelt buckle or whatever it is, it'll put pressure on your holster and your body, and it'll squeeze in tight enough that it'll actually pop the mag out. I've had that problem before carrying inside the waistband on the hip with various pistol models that have protruding magazine releases like this, and it's just not something I'm a fan of. However, it's not really a problem if you carry appendix or if you carry on the hip outside of the waistband. So it's just something to be aware of. And also with the magazine release, unfortunately for you left-handed shooters, it doesn't look like this has the ability to swap the mag release to be ambidextrous, which again, in my opinion, isn't a deal breaker, because if you are lefty and you need to release the magazine, you can just reach back with like your middle finger, pop it, and you're good to go. Moving down, you have the magazine well itself. I actually kind of like what they did here. Again, I've heard people on the interwebs, right, complain about these cutouts, saying when they go to insert magazines, it pinches their hands, which I did a number of reloads, as you can even see in the videos, and just right there with this gun, and I wanted to pinch my hands even with my meaty paws. You can see when I'm gripping down on it, I've got a lot of overhang on my hand, including, you know, some of my hands sitting into those grooves. And again, not a problem at all when I'm loading and unloading. Okay, so that's just not an issue I experienced. And for me, the benefit that you get from it to clear out potential catastrophic malfunctions is better than not having them. And the idea behind these slide cuts, for those of you that may not know, is if you do have a bad malfunction, sometimes the mag can actually get bound up into the gun itself, and it can be difficult to strip out if you can't really get a good grip on the magazine itself. So these cutouts allow you to get a little bit more of a pull, so if you do need to strip that mag, you've just got that much more real estate to grab onto and really rip it out there. And that's a really added bonus for people that may not have as much hand strength, for smaller people, for slightly weaker people. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just there's people of varying sizes and strengths out there, especially when it comes to grip and being able to manipulate weapons. And having that little bit extra space to really strip that mag out is an awesome addition, in my opinion. So awesome on them for introducing those mag cuts. And then we'll actually move back up to the trigger. I'm not one to get hung up around triggers, right? I'm not super picky about them. It's as long as it's not super heavy and it breaks consistently, I'm happy, right? So I'm not super picky about it. I don't need a super hair trigger. I don't like super, lightweight match grade, hair triggers, especially for a pistol that I'm going to carry in self-defense, because I don't want to accidentally, send off a round when the adrenaline's pumping, when I don't want to send that round off. So I do want some play, I do want a little bit of weight, and I do want that controllability in the trigger. And I think Palmetto actually did a really good job with this. And this is actually one of the other differentiators, between the Glock variation and the compact dagger. So one, this is it doesn't have a typical trigger bar like Glocks, where it has this bar that you press down and then you can activate the trigger. Although it functions very similarly. It's more of a lever, where this bottom part levers down, removes the bar in the back there, if you can see it, and then allows the trigger to go actuate all the way. So if this lever isn't pressed down, then the trigger is not going to be able to actuate. Okay, so functions very similarly, just a little bit of a different design. As far as the feel and the weight of it, again, very similar to the Gen 3s, Gen 4s. I wouldn't say it's quite as light as the Gen 5, but the take up and the feel and the break of it all is very similar. And again, in the online sphere, see a lot of people complain about how creepy it is and how much take up and how much play there is. And you're always going to find that in a trigger if you're babying the trigger. I could come up to any trigger and just give it, just little bit of tiny input every time until it finally breaks. And of course, you're going to find play and creep in it if you shoot it that way. It's not designed to be shot that way, right? So my Gen 5 45, which actually has a decent stock trigger, for a Glock, believe it or not, it'll do the same thing. In fact, it actually has a little bit more of a creep in multiple walls, I think, than the dagger. So, but that's not the way the triggers are designed to be shot, because when you're running these guns, fast and hard, if you just press the trigger, there is a consistency to it. As long as you're giving it good, strong, consistent input, it's going to break how it's designed to. Not break, but the shot break, right? The trigger being actuated, making the gun go off. Breaking the shot being the terminology for that. So it actually feels good when you press it the way it's designed to be pressed. So, yeah. So absolutely no complaints on the trigger. I'm actually a pretty big fan of it for an out-of-the-box budget pistol stock trigger. I would say they did a very good job with that. All right, guys, a few other things. We're going to talk about the holster compatibility with Glock holsters. Now this is something else I did a little bit of research on, because I saw there was quite a few people that said there wasn't compatibility with Glock 19 holsters, and that may be true depending on a specific setup. And what I mean by that is I was running mine with a weapon light, and mine with a weapon light was able to fit into my Glock 19 holsters well enough. Now initially when I tried to fit them, they were extremely tight. So this one's adjusted for the dagger, this one is not. Now this one's adjusted to still fit my Gen 5 45 the way I like it. And when I go to put the dagger in it with the light, it will fit, but it's extremely tight. It did the same thing with the G-code incog holster I have over here initially, but all I did was loosened up the tension a little bit, and now it snaps in and comes out just fine. Like, this is the same holster I shot during the entire video, and you can see it now here. Comes in and out just fine with the friction that I like. So no problems with the compatibility with this light. Now, where the compatibility issues may come into play is if you're using a holster that isn't cut for a light bearing pistol. Now, I don't have a non-light bearing holster to stick the dagger in to be able to determine that for you guys. So that's not something I can say for certain on that aspect of the compatibility. However, what I can say is you can use Glock 19 holsters for sure, as long as you have a weapon light. Because for those of you that may not know, usually when you have weapon lights on the pistols, the holsters are designed for the friction points to lock in around the lights themselves. So when you're going in and you're adjusting all the tension, it's adjusting where it's gripping down and locking into the light itself. And that may be where the compatibility issues come into play. So again, if it's a non-light bearing holster, I can't tell you whether or not it's going to fit exactly. I think the trigger guards on the compacts are a little bit wider, and I think that may be where some of the compatibility issue comes in. But that may be something you're able to solve if you have Glock 19 holsters. You're able to get a hold of one for cheap, or the manufacturer that you really want one from doesn't make a dagger holster, but they make a 19 holster. You might be able to modify it a little bit to be able to fit the dagger just fine without a light. Don't quote me on that. I don't want you to waste your money experimenting and trying that stuff. That's just stuff that I personally like to do, and I'm trying to really configure things to the way that I want them. But that's something you're going to have to either try for yourself or seek out somebody that's done those comparisons, because again, I don't have a non-light bearing Glock holster to be able to compare that for you guys. So sorry about that, but again, as long as you have a light and can loosen up the tension on your holster. As far as Glock 19 holster compatibility for the Palmetto compact dagger goes, you should be good to go. All right, guys, just a few parting notes about the compact itself and about my experience and review with it. Again, I've only got about 400 to 500 rounds through it. In the terms of a lifespan of a pistol, that's really not that much. So everything that I've told you is based on that period of time that I've shot it. And that opinion very well could change, after I put 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 rounds through it. Because the quality of the parts and the manufacturing do really start to make a difference when you're getting into those thousands of rounds shot through the pistol. But you also have to take in consideration whether or not that's what they're designing it for, right? Palmetto State may not even be designing the dagger for somebody that's going to shoot 10,000 rounds through it in a year. Because when you shoot that many rounds through it, then you start to have, you get a lot of wear and tear on parts that may need to be replaced, like recoil springs, the barrel's getting shot out, extractors failing, problems with your triggers, problems with your trigger bars, things, smaller parts on the pistol, if they aren't designed well or made with quality parts, they do start to fail after time, because again, they're machines, right? And any machine, no matter how good it is, will get wear and tear on it. It's just a matter of whether it's sooner or later. And right now I can't determine that with daggers because I've only shot it within the sooner phase. But again, within that sooner phase, that 400 to 500 rounds, it's been awesome. So maybe if I can get a hold of another one and get a few thousand rounds through it, over time, I'll be able to talk more on it and speak more on that. However, for just your average gun owner that's trying to save money and wants something that's going to shoot well and reliably, is going to have a lot of aftermarket support. So, again, this has Gen 3 Glock part compatibility. And from what I've seen, people are going to start making more dedicated holsters for the compact daggers themselves. You're going to start getting support and aftermarket parts and materials for these. That's going to go a long ways to increasing the usability and longevity of these pistols, which is awesome, especially since you can get them for cheaper than most of your Glocks. Now, is the price difference, the $150 to $200 that you're going to be saving between a compact dagger and a Glock going to be a deal breaker? Or is it going to be enough of a benefit for you to go with the dagger over the Glock? I can't say that for you because I don't know what your situation is. I don't know what your budget is. But I will put it to you this way, right? If you're buying an individual pistol, that $150 to $200 isn't going to be a massive savings, but it could be enough to get you a few boxes of ammunition, and maybe an introductory handgun course. Something that, because a lot of places locally, you can find local trainers that can teach you competent gun handling and gun safety and some basic marksmanship for somewhere around $100, right? So you've got $100 for ammunition and $100 for a basic introductory course and a pistol that's, generally speaking, reliable and good to go. So for all that, for the amount that you could buy a Glock, that's definitely a strong positive to consider. Or if you're somebody that's maybe putting together a church security team, or maybe even a school security team in some districts, or maybe a neighborhood watch, or maybe you've got a family, a large family that you're trying to arm and train. Say you're buying 10 plus pistols, then $150 to $200 savings can add up pretty quick. After that 10 pistols, you're looking at $1,500 to $2,000 worth of savings. So in terms of whether or not the cost savings is worth it, when you look at it from that aspect, it can definitely add up pretty quick in terms of what you save. So just other things to consider, guys. Again, this is all my opinion, and I'm not in your shoes. I can't speak for you directly, but I hope the information that I gave you here will help you decide whether or not the compact dagger is worth it and for you. And also with that, I'd like to thank Palmetto State. They sent this to American Gun Facts, who sent it to me for review. So I appreciate you guys passing this on to me to get this information to you. And again, I hope it's really helpful. I also like to thank Legion Arms out of Pittsburgh, PA. It was local to me. They let me use their range to record that shooting content that you guys saw. So if you happen to be in the Pittsburgh area, definitely check them out. That's Legion Arms, as well as my buddy who runs some training out of there. It's Hardpoint Training. His name's Hutch, so he helped me with some of the recording, as well as he's the skinny mustached guy in the video shooting. That's Hutch with Hardpoint. He's an awesome pistol trainer, so check him out as well. But that's all I got for you guys. Thanks for coming by.